Hello everyone, welcome to Ace Maths. In the previous video, we learned how to add and subtract surds by collecting like terms. In this video, we are going to learn how to multiply and divide surds, and then we will extend that to brackets containing surds, exactly as you see in IGCSE exams. Don't worry, the rules are simple and I will explain everything step by step. Before we start with examples, let's recall some important rules. The first rule is root x times root y is square root of xy. So here we can see that when we multiply surds, we can multiply inside the square root. The second rule says root x times root x is equal to x. That means root x squared is x. We have already discussed this rule in our previous video. And the third rule says root x divided by root y is equal to square root of x over y. So when we divide surds, we divide inside the square root. These rules come from the laws of indices, which you already know. Let's start with a simple example. Root 3 times root 7. Here, using the rule that we just learned, we can multiply inside the root. That means I can write it as square root of 3 times 7. 3 times 7 is 21. So it will become square root of 21. And the square root of 21 cannot be simplified further. So this would be our final answer. Now let's try an example with numbers in front. Here we will multiply the numbers 2 and 3 separately and the surds square root of 3 and square root of 5 separately. So I can write it as 2 root 3 is 2 times root 3 multiplied by 3 root 5 is 3 times root 5. Now let's multiply the numbers. We have 2 times 3. 2 times 3 is 6 multiplied by root 3 and root 5. Now using the rules that we just learned, I can write it as 6 times square root of 3 multiplied by 5. So it will become 6 times 3 times 5 is 15. So I can write it as square root of 15. 6 times square root of 15 is 6 root 15. Now let's divide surds. Here we have square root of 21 divided by square root of 3. Using the rules we just learned, I can write it as square root of 21 over 3. 3 times 7 is 21, so I can write it as square root of 7. And it would be the final answer. Moving on to the next example. This example looks complicated, but the method is the same. Let's solve this. I can write this as 8 over 2 multiplied by root 30 over root 6, right? I can divide this. 2 times 4 is 8. So we have 4 multiplied by, now here look closely, here we have root 30 over root 6, right? Using the laws that we just learned, I can perform this division under the same square root symbol. So I can write it as square root of 30 over 6. Now 30 over 6 is 5, so 4 times root 5. 4 times root 5 is just 4 root 5, and it would be the final answer. Now let's move on to brackets containing surds. Look carefully that here this root 5 is multiplying every term inside the bracket. So we distribute it carefully. First, we need to multiply root 5 with 3. That is our first multiplication. And then we need to multiply root 5 with root 2. That is the second multiplication, right? Let's do the first multiplication. So we have root 5 times 3. That is 3 root 5. Okay. And now let's do the second multiplication. So we have root 5 multiplied by root 2. Now again, I can write it as square root of 5 times 2. That is square root of 10. Now let's go back to the question. First, let me write the result of the first multiplication, that is 3 root 5, and then I will write the result of the second multiplication, that is root 10. So it would be plus root 10. So 3 root 5 plus root 10 would be the final answer. Now moving on to the next question. Here notice the negative sign that is present outside the bracket. That is very important. Now here minus 3 is multiplying every term inside the bracket. So we need to multiply negative 3 with 5. That would be the first multiplication. And then we need to multiply negative 3 with negative root 7. That would be the second multiplication, right? Okay, so let me do the first multiplication. That is negative 3 multiplied by 5. That is negative 15. Now, the second multiplication is about minus 3 multiplied by negative root 7. Be very careful with signs. That is positive 3 root 7. Now, let me go back to the original question. Let's write the result of the first multiplication, that is negative root 15. And now let's write the result of the second multiplication, that is positive 3 root 7. And that would be the answer of this question. Let's solve the next question. This is a very common IGCSE exam style question. So I recommend that you pause the video and try to answer on your own. Let me show you how we can solve this question. Here we have 4 root 3 present outside the bracket, right? So 4 root 3 is multiplying every term inside the bracket. So we need to multiply 4 root 3 with 2 root 2. That would be the first multiplication. And then we need to multiply 4 root 3 with negative root 3. That would be the second multiplication. Now, let's do our first multiplication. We have 4 root 3 multiplied by 2 root 2. We have already solved a very similar question in this video. Here I can write it as 4 times root 3 multiplied by 2 times root 2. Now I can multiply this 4 with 2. 4 multiplied by 2 is 8, and we have root 3 times root 2. Now I can perform this multiplication under one square root symbol, that is 3 times 2. 8 multiplied by square root of 3 times 2 is 6. So we have 8 root 6. That is the result of the first multiplication. Now let me do the second multiplication. We have 4 root 3 multiplied by negative root 3. Now let's solve this. 4 root 3 is 4 times root 3, and then we have minus root 3. So I can just place this negative sign here. It does not change the value. And then let me just write root 3 here. Minus 4 root 3 times root 3. That is square of root 3. And it would be just 3, because in the very first few minutes of the video, I told you some rules, and one of the rules were root x whole squared is x. So minus 4 times 3 is negative 12. Now let's go back to the original question and let me write the final answer. First, let me write the result from the first multiplication, that is 8 root 6. So I will write 8 root 6. And then let me check the result of the second multiplication, that is negative 12. So let me just write negative 12 here. And that would be the answer of this question. Okay, now let me quickly point out a few common mistakes. The first one is you cannot add unlike surds. For example, root 5 plus root 3. You cannot write root 5 plus root 3 is equal to root 8. That is completely wrong. We cannot add unlike surds. The second one is always simplify square roots like root 9 and root 4 fully, because we know that 9 and 4 are perfect squares. So root 9 is just 3 and root 4 is just 2. So do not leave your answers in surds, especially if the number inside the surd is a perfect square. Last but not the least, when working with brackets, always multiply every term inside the bracket, keeping their signs as given in the question. Let's summarize what we learned today. We learned how to multiply surds, divide surds, and expand brackets containing surds. These questions appear very frequently in IGCSE extended papers. If this video helped you, make sure you practice a few questions on your own. That is all for today's video. Thank you for watching.